Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the third day of the Future Law Virtual Summit. Today we have Rishi Maharaj with us. Rishi, you are the Executive Director of the EquiGo Institute, a social enterprise focused on consultancy and research across areas such as data protection, basically protection and governance, information access, transparency, and monitoring, as well as the evaluation. Sounds like a lot of good and interesting things. And today you're going to be presenting us a bit more about how privacy and trust supports the strategy. I'm very eager to hear more about that, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Anya, for yourself and for your team's invitation to present on this very interesting topic of privacy, trust, and strategy. It's something that's very dear to me, being in the field for such a long time, and also coming from a Caribbean perspective, where I think we're still evolving with the whole idea of privacy and trust, and businesses not really seeing the value of it. So thank you very much again. I like to normally start these sessions with a very interesting quote from Warren Buffett that I love. And Warren Buffett is quoted to have said that it takes normally 20 years to build a reputation, but that could be all ruined in about 5 minutes. And I would add a caveat to say probably in less than 5 minutes, maybe a minute or 5 seconds, such as the interconnectedness of the world today that we live in. And it's more so because of the amount of data that organizations collect on us. Normally, we think of data and collection of data, we normally think of government and the amount of data government collects on us. But in the world that we live in now, at least for the last 15, 20 years or so, a lot more of private organizations collect a lot more data on us. They collect data about who you are, where you live. You know, they track you all the time if you use Waze, Google Maps, all those things, and constantly under surveillance. So they know where you go, they know where you live, they know where your purchasing history is, they know who your family members are, who your associates are, and everything. And then there's also the metadata that's attached to data, so data about data. And with the advancements of analytics, machine learning, we can see, we are now seeing where a lot of this metadata is now being used with data that they collect to be able to draw inferences on you, what you would buy, what your preferences would be from one to another, which party you would support, and different things. And I came across about a month ago, or probably a month and a half ago, an interesting acronym for those groups of company that controls a bulk of data on us as individuals. And the acronym is FAANG, FAANG. I'm not sure if you ever heard of that acronym. It was very interesting when I heard of it. So the acronym, it's FAANG. And you think of FAANG, you think of something sticking its teeth or something into you and drawing stuff out of you, like snakes, you know, infecting you with venom and stuff like that. So what does FAANG stand for? Well, when I say it, I think you'll understand, you probably will agree. So FAANG stands for F, Facebook, A, Apple, A, Amazon, N, Netflix, and G, Google. So that's the FAANG acronym. Those companies, if you really look at it, at those companies holistically, the amount of data that they collect, it's a lot more than what governments collect on us holistically. And most of the biggest companies in the world today have expanded and grown that the world has ever known, actually, has grown over the last 20 years of database organizations that have no assets. They say that Uber is the biggest taxi service in the world, doesn't own one car. Airbnb is the largest hotel chain in the world, doesn't own a hotel or own a hotel room. So we're seeing now the proliferation of data that's held by organizations. But we're also seeing over the last, I think, maybe 10 years or so, but it's really, for me, blown up a lot more over the last 4 or 5 years with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, the whole idea of data protection and privacy. And people now waking up to the understanding that, hey, organizations hold a lot of data on us. But what do we know that they hold? What do we know? What do they do with it? I think the Facebook Analytica scandal really exposed that greatly in terms of, you know, people who have access to data that you didn't know will have access to your data. So data for now for me and privacy is now It's not a nice to have, it's now a necessity. And it's a necessity that I think all boardrooms, all C-suite managers need to be aware of within the organization. But of course, businesses are about making money. You don't get into business unless you really want to make money. So on most organizations would be, well, why should I really care about privacy? What's the value of that for me? I like to quote an interesting statistic study that was done, I think it was done last year by Cisco. I think they published it either late last year or early this year, where they actually did a deep dive into understanding privacy, organizations, and the benefits or the benchmarking, the benefits of privacy to organizations. And one thing they realized within their study is that over 40% of the organizations that they surveyed saw a great benefit within the privacy spend into the organization. What they also realized is that for every dollar that organizations spent on privacy, they got about 2.7, in return. So for every dollar you spent, you got about $2.70 in return on your investment. So what they saw is that a lot of organizations that have spent on privacy, spent on putting proper systems, proper procedures, proper policies, proper frameworks in place to be able to manage the data that they have on customers, on clients, on their own employees, has paid off dividend in the long run. I think we all can see the value of giving our data to organizations. There is value in it. There's value from a speed perspective. You get access to goods and services quicker. There's a relevance there because you now don't have to sift through, what I like, what I don't like, but you get straight to, understand, okay, these are what my likes are, and these are something that I'll be interested in. So you get relevance and you get engagement, people talking to you, and it feels a lot more personable. So I think nobody may disagree in the world that we live in today that, personal data that we share with organizations should not be shared. But obviously, with all the benefits that you have with sharing personal data with organizations, you also have certain pitfalls. Pitfalls such as intrusive actions. So intrusive actions coming from the point of, breaches happening within organizations and people getting the information. Unknown use of your personal data. You've shared your data with company A or company B, but unbeknown to you, company M and company N are also getting your data and also using your data, which you did not have any idea of. And I think that came out clearly in the Facebook Analytica situation where we saw that, Facebook, you gave your information to Facebook or you use Facebook, but other third parties were now getting access to and scraping your data and using your data for reasons and for things that you really had no knowledge of, you didn't give consent to. Fraud is also a big thing where we see a rise or a spike in identity fraud, people getting your access to your data and being able to use it to impersonate you, get credit cards on your name, it ruins your credit rating and stuff like that. Discrimination is also a big thing. A lot of people just don't share certain information about themselves because there's a fear. There's a fear of discrimination. There's a fear of stigmatization. There's a fear that you would not be able to access certain goods and services because of your ethnicity, because of where you live, because of your religious background, because of your sexual orientation and such like that. So, there's also fears that with this kind of information going out there, it can really affect you from a discriminatory point of view. And then obviously debt. Someone who wants to find you, wants to hurt you, gets access to the information. They know where you live, they find out where you live, or you're moving or trying to avoid certain people. And all of a sudden, things happen and it could mean something sad for you. So there really is a really big issue for me with organizations protecting your data. I take that very seriously with regards to how we manage data, how we collect data, how we use data, how we store it, who has access to the data, and everything else. For me, I think it really is a value for organizations, and we've seen from the research from Cisco and those guys that once you invest in privacy and put in the proper framework, that you will actually benefit from it. So, like I said, I didn't want this session to be all about me talking. So I really wanted to just get some quick basic points on why privacy, I think, is good for business and good for strategy. So I just have 6 quick points to really try to drive that home. One, obviously, is compliance. So obviously, we live in a world now where we see regulatory compliance coming on more and more and more. 2016 saw GDPR being implemented in the EU, which is considered right now the benchmark or the gold standard for data protection laws in the world today. And then we've also seen a cascade of data protection laws now starting to probably not happen, but probably start to amend based on the way GDPR has taken a look at privacy and at organization, because GDPR is now extra territorial. So if you're based in the US or based in some other country, but you're targeting EU nationals, you're now affected by GDPR. And we're now seeing organizations and countries in the world beginning to make amendments. I think Brazil just last month finally implemented their own version of data protection, which is, again, it has certain components of GDPR. Then we saw within the US, from a state point of view, CCPA in California, in which they began to put more stringent regulations in terms of how data is being used of the people within in California. And even in the Caribbean, where I'm from, we've actually seen movements towards enhancing your data protection laws. So, for example, Barbados last year implemented, well, they passed the Data Protection Act, which is, if you read the Data Protection Act, it's like GDPR cut and paste in terms of they've actually used GDPR as the foundation for their laws, and they're now in the steps of implementing or getting an information commissioner. And then just this year, Jamaica actually passed their own Data Protection Act, and I think they're now making steps towards next year to begin the implementation of it. And then in my own country of Trinidad and Tobago, although we have a Data Protection Act that was passed in 2011, which predates GDPR, our government has now taken steps to really consult and to make amendments to our legislation based on GDPR and based on what other countries are doing in regards to it. So there's a compliance reason why many organizations obviously would want to have a privacy program in place. Also, it prevents breaches. I think during this whole COVID-19 situation, we've seen where data breaches have really skyrocketed in terms of, people intrusion. I know Anya would have mentioned that just yesterday they got hacked with regards to the program that they have in here now. So data breaches are becoming relevant, and they're really becoming proliferant. So it helps also to understand exactly, we hear about KYC, know your customer. For me, I like to use the acronym KYD, know your data. Or having a proper privacy program in place helps you to know your data. Who has your data, who collects your data, the different touch points of your data, where does it move through, who has access to it. And by knowing those touch points, you'll be able to see where your weaknesses are, or where maybe there are people who have an access to it that shouldn't have access to it. And I should mention here, this is not only electronic data, but it's also hard copy data. Any kind of data you collect, either electronically or paper-based. It allows you to know your touch points and know exactly what's going on. You may not even know that you're sharing your data with other people, that the organization may not be aware of. So it allows you to know exactly what goes on, the flow of your data within your organization. So you can pinpoint where your weaknesses may be, so you can strengthen or you can eliminate those different touch points. It also helps to maintain and improve brand value. I think in 2017, there was a study that was done in Australia by I hope I pronounced this correctly, the Ponyman organization, in which they did a study and they found that companies that suffer data breaches lost about a 5 to 7% share price within the organization. I think we also saw that with Facebook and their scandal with Cambridge Analytica, where you saw that share prices dropped dramatically within the couple of days when Zuckerberg when he was in Congress and testifying and stuff like that. So it does hurt the business. Once you've suffered a data breach, research have shown, not only in Australia, but in the US, I think Target also had the same issue when they had their breach a couple of years back, that it hurts share value. Hurting share value means it hurts your investors and it hurts the value of your company. So having a privacy program in place, again, from a breach perspective, it puts things in place that allows you to maintain your brand value within the organization. It also allows you to strengthen and grow your business. Many organizations, we are now global. We are a global community. We're a global world. We're no longer constrained in doing business within our land and sea borders. You now open up your business to any part of the world, and the internet allows for that to happen. So by having a good privacy program in place, it also gives you, I think, the benefit of being able to go and attract other markets in the world, because you can now say, listen, we adhere to the high standards. Either we are GDPR based in our privacy program, we are ISO based, because there are now ISO standards like 27701. So there are different standards and things that you can now go to other markets and say, listen, you know what? We are a privacy compliant in the way that we treat it. We've reached the highest standards. So it opens up other markets to your organization that you normally would not think about getting into. It also helps maintain trust, trust within your investors. It also helps maintain consumer trust. Because Cisco also did a study, I think, in 2019 that they published early this year, where you saw that a lot of people, I think 65% of some people that they surveyed said that they would leave an organization or not do business with a company because there was a data breach or because they don't trust the way that organization handles their personal information. So we're now seeing where consumers now are voting with their pockets and voting with their economic strength to say, listen, if I am not sure that you are going to be handling my information in a proper way, or I've suffered a breach and I'm not sure that you have proper things in place, I am going to leave your organization. So again, it comes down to customer trust, customer loyalty, shareholder trust. Because if your shareholders don't have value that you are investing in, because if customers leave, automatically that means you lose money. Losing money from a shareholder means, well, you're not doing good. So I need to probably take my money elsewhere and invest elsewhere. So again, it's investor trust, customer trust. Of course, it helps to build customer loyalty within your organization. But I think one thing I like to drive home is that it's not just important to say, stand up and say, okay, listen, we accept privacy is important and we adhere to policy. It's not a checkpoint move anymore. I think the law and regulators are now saying that. They're saying now that it's no longer, you must not just speak it by mouth, but you must do it by action. And a good example, I think, is Facebook. Always a great example when it comes to privacy. I think it was sometime last year where Mr. Zuckerberg came out and said, Facebook values our consumers' privacy. We value the privacy of the customers on our platform. So we adhere to the privacy. About 3 days afterwards, I believe, in a Californian court, where some residents in California took them to court because of Cambridge Analytica and because of unreasonable use of their data by third parties. Same Facebook lawyers were in court arguing, listen, it wasn't an unjust right. You have no right to privacy and you have no right to bring this case against us. So on one hand, you're saying, listen, we respect privacy of our clients, we respect their privacy. And on the other hand, you have your lawyers going in court and saying, listen, you don't have your right to privacy, terms and conditions. There was no harm done. You can't prove that harm was done because they got your information. So again, it's saying with one mouth and then doing another thing. So it's not about just putting a checkbox, having a privacy notice, which we all know most people don't really read privacy notice. You just scroll on to the bottom, you click I consent, and you move on. So it's about accountability and transparency. And it's interesting that I said transparency, because privacy and transparency, they seem to be separate things. One says you have to protect information, and one says you have to be open. But in order to have privacy, for me, you need to have transparency. You need to have transparency within your organization as to how they organize, how they treat it, and how they use your data. Because for me, that is important. So if it's one thing you can take away from this little talk of mine, would be that to have privacy, you need to have transparency. Organizations need to be transparent in the way that they treat with customers' data. Because from what we've seen in research done in the US, in the EU, and other parts of the world, customers are beginning to vote, and they're beginning to say, listen, if I don't trust what you're doing with my data, I'm going to leave and go somewhere else. And I think that is also important for me, from like I said, I'm coming from a Caribbean perspective, where we're now starting to see that consumers are now becoming advocates for data and how you use my data and how you want to use my data. So I think I've talked enough for the last maybe 15 minutes or so. So I thank you very much for my little discussion on privacy, trust, and the importance for it to strategy and to business. And I am open and free for any questions or any discussions that we will have, because I don't know it all. I never claim to know everything about it, but it's, for me, I think it's a good starting point to have a discussion. I'd love to hear what other people's viewpoints are on, the importance of organizations taking privacy and taking the way they hold our data seriously. So I open the floor now.
This is quite incredible. Thank you so much, Rishi, for providing us with these insights. For those who have joined later, we've actually opened up, well, Rishi opened it up with a quote from Warren Buffett saying that it takes 20 years to build a reputation and only 5 minutes to actually put it down, to ruin it, right? And then Rishi said, well, today with the information and the speed of how the information is being shared across all the networks that we have created, it might take even less than 5 minutes. It might as well be within a minute or even less than a minute sometimes. And knowing that today, what you said just before you closed up is that the consumers are becoming the advocates for data. Now, my question would be, are we building anything towards having the reputation built also within minutes, and then preventing from it being ruined within such a short time? Because nevertheless, I mean, it does seem that we could use data to build our reputation, to kind of contribute towards, hey, I've done so much, and I can send you the resume, and you can talk around, and you can ask questions to kind of confirm that this is exactly what I said and that I am speaking truth. But there might as well be like a token, or there might as well be a badge that I wear, or there might be as well a signature on the email, let's say, that guarantees that I'm speaking the truth. And that signature could be done within a minute. It could provide you with exact information within a minute, instead of just having this opposite situation today in the network community of, network community that we have built today. Do you think that that awaits us in the future, or is it just going to become worse and worse and worse?
No, I'm not I tend not to be a pessimist. I tend to be an optimist. Yeah, I think there are always challenges. Listen, technology is advancing every day, and law is always playing catch up. So it's about understanding, what needs to be done. And I think to your question, the whole idea of authentication, that this is who I am, and these are my credentials are authenticated. So what if I send you an email, or if I send documents stating this is who I am or what I do, then it's authenticated, because we have issues now of deep fake, people getting your images and mimicking what you say to make it sound differently and stuff like that. So I think the technology is now starting to get there. I know you're big into blockchain and the possibilities that blockchain and those things offer, to be able to assure that, if I send you something, or if I put something out there, that it is who I am. But I think it's also education, because again, people will say things, I mean, Donald Trump puts out a tweet today, and half the population of the US may believe what he's saying, and the other half don't. So it's about, I think, educating people to just don't take things at face value. It's about understanding the world today, because communication moves so quickly that people can be malicious, and people are malicious. I mean, that's just how some people are. So it's about not taking things at face value, and doing some deeper research. And I think that's also a problem that we see tech companies are facing. Twitter would ban your account or shut down your account and stuff like that. So it's about balancing that. But then people within the US will say, well, it's my First Amendment right, free speech. I can say what I want and stuff like that. But should your free speech be harmful to someone else in a negative way, where it turns out to be wrong, blasphemous, or liable? And then what are my repercussions for that if that happens? So I think, like I said, the world and law is always playing catch up. So I think at the end of the day, it's about, making sure that, using technology that's existing right now to be able to authenticate and to, tokenize certain things. So, it's coming from me and not nobody else, but also being able to probably take this more from a sectoral point of view. I think it's still, data protection is still territorial. So we see right now there's a battle going on between the EU and the US, particularly with data. Recent judgment on Privacy Shield. And the EU and the US about whose privacy law is more important and stuff like that. I think it needs to move away from that geopolitical battle that we're having to more of a, it's a worldwide phenomenon that we're facing. And many third world countries will tell you that we're facing situations right now with this COVID-19 pandemic, where a lot of governments are now using surveillance, these apps to be able to surveil us, and we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. So I think it's now transcended from geopolitical to a worldwide, a worldwide debate that we need to be having.
Yeah, this definitely resonates with me. I mean, also kind of fits the notion of having the global citizenship, becoming more and more globalized. I mean, we have transcended those borders, and with having data all over the place, it kind of sounds as if we would need to get rid of these geopolitical battles as well. As well, absolutely. Um, does anybody from the public also have any questions for Rishi? Ana Luisa, Iguin, Augustine. Iguin, go for it.
Thank you, Anya. Rishi, even though I tuned in a bit later, I want to thank you for your very comprehensive and exhaustive explanation. One thing that I miss a little bit in the discussion is the economic dimension, because without citizens realizing they are treated as consumers, as economic beings, because their data is in fact the new cash, and they are paying with their data for a whole range of so-called free services. Look at all the nice things that Google can give you, for instance. It gives you that for free. And they used to have a pirate flag on top of their building, I think, stating that they would never be a bad company. But I doubt whether they are now any better than Facebook or some others of this digital world. So that is the economic dimension. We are trading our data for nothing really other than services that we can't even control. And I fear that to get back to your suggestion of some kind of a quality seal, I fear that might not be of much help, because we have already way too many quality seals, ranging from employer of the year or most popular this or that, to green eco labels that you just pay for as a company. You comply with a few very easy rules, and then you can flaunt the quality seal. So I am a bit skeptical of that.
Very true. Rishi, do you have any comment on that? What is the not the ecological, but the economic perspective of data? What's your
Well, yeah, I mean, there's this famous book out there called, Surveillance Capitalism, by Shoshone. I don't remember her last name offhand, but it's a really good book. I think if you haven't read it, you should read it in terms of how she looks at it. And she's right. If you aren't paying for it, then you're the product. And I think that's why I mentioned Edwin early on. Sorry, I took off my headphones. I mentioned early on, it's an interesting acronym I came about recently. The acronym is FANG, FAANG. And I'm not sure if you heard that, but FANG stands for, it's interesting that the acronym actually says FANG. If you think about what FANGs are, FANGs actually stands for Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. The 5 companies that really collect a lot of data on you. And yeah, I think one of the points she makes in her book is the lack of accountability and transparency within these organizations, that you don't know what they're using your data for. They don't want to tell you about it, but they want you to freely give up your data and be open and transparent. So it's an unequalness. And then it comes down to the amount of money that they're making from your data. Facebook doesn't own any tangible products. Neither does, like I said, Uber and Airbnb. But when they do an IPO, they're valued in the billions and billions of dollars. So I think it needs to be, and for me, I will always wear my civil society hat and say that this is where I think we now need as a community as civil society to be able now to stand up to these organizations and really say, listen, you know, enough is enough. We understand at the end of the day, we can't live private lives and keep our information to ourselves. So it's obviously a trade-off one way or the other. But we still, you need to be also accountable to us and you need to let us know what's going on. So it really, I think the point is now it's going to reach there very soon, if not already has reached there, where you're going to see a lot of private actors, civil society organizations standing up to these organizations.
Oh my God, Rishi, there's so much to talk about. I mean, there's oversight board that Facebook now has. There is, data privacy that we would need to establish and transparency with regard to our own organizations. The hacking that happened with Zoom, I mean, that's probably just because we shoot out the links to everybody and made it very much welcome to whomever wants to troll our community. But we are definitely becoming more and more mindful of that. And the more experiences we have with those types of things, the more use cases we see out there. I do believe the same thing that you said. The consumers are now becoming the data advocates. I strongly believe that that is the case. And I hope that we're going to see you more often in the NCOP. So perhaps there's going to be an NCOP for data and data surveillance, who knows. But thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you very much. And thank you all very much for giving me this time on your Sunday. Kind of Sunday is a very lazy day where we all like to sit back and relax. So I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity on this Sunday to be able to share some insight that I have on this topic.